Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Under Review. My name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter at show_DeRosa. And it is finally upon us. This year's training camp is here, and we have a lot to cover on today's episode. And I am very excited to be joined by Chris Kepner. You can find him also on Cover One, usually in the Cover One and Friends spaces that we do weekly. It's going to be a fun episode, so buckle up and let's go.
Previous play will go under review.
And once again, everybody, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Under Review. If you could do us all a favor and please drop a like on this video, as well as all of the other content coming out on Cover One. These guys do an incredible job of providing you content, especially with the whirlwind that is training camp and the offseason coming to a close and the regular season now upon us. But as I mentioned before, I am joined by the incomparable Chris Kepner, who took
incomparable.
That took it time out of a busy Saturday to be here today, and I really appreciate it, Chris. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited to talk some training camp with you.
Hey man, thanks for having me. And before we go too far, I just got to say I think you're missing an opportunity in your intro. Can I tell you? Gonna give you a note real quick.
Oh, absolutely.
All right. So you say let's go, right? But how about let's Joe? You knew it was happening before.
You know something? It's funny because I have not thought of that, and you would think I would have, just considering the tagline and everything, and the fact that I do Joe puns on this show every single week. But I did not think of that, and you got it. Oh man, I might have to do that next week. And for all of you in the chat today, I want to say good morning and thank you so much for tuning in as well. I see we got a couple people already here. Look at this one. It's 5 a.m. I thought she said it's Sam in Hawaii. I'm like, I thought her name was Sophia. Yeah, 5 a.m. in Hawaii watching us. Sophia, we appreciate your view. That's true dedication to the brand. Super, super happy to have you here. And also, hello, Justin. We appreciate your view as well. And I see you talking about some formations in the chat. We are going to get to that eventually. But Chris, training camp's here. We've had the first 3 days pass us by, and there's been some interesting things to note about this year's camp. And the first question, just getting right down to it today, is really just, in your mind, who has shown out on offense and defense so far? Anyone that you can point out and say, wow, like I'm really impressed with what they brought to the table?
As a caveat, I was not able to attend in person this year, unfortunately. But from all of the recaps and the stuff that people have been putting out there on Twitter, I think the biggest surprise for me right now is Baylon Spector. The conversation around the middle linebacker battle has been pretty in depth. I feel like that's the one battle that everyone has had an eye on. There's a few others that are going on, but that's the one because of the huge pterodactyl size hole that we have from Tremaine Edmonds leaving. And Spector has been talked about in that conversation as like a, second tier option, right? It's always been, is it going to be Terrell Dodson or Terrell Bernard or maybe Dorian Williams? Now it feels like the Bills are giving Spector a really good look, and he's maybe one of 2 or 3 guys that actually have a legit shot at that starting role.
Yeah, Baylon Spector, he's on my list for defense, absolutely. I had done a linebacker show a couple weeks prior where I had mentioned he was one of the candidates, and I had said that of Baylon Spector, of Terrell Bernard, of Dorian Williams, that each one had some sort of attribute that you could use to create one whole Tremaine Edmonds. With Baylon Spector, it felt like his forte, his bread and butter, was being that like very good run defender archetype of linebacker, which is what I think they value very highly in this defense, because I had said, I don't know if they're going to task this year's new linebacker, whoever it may be, with a lot of pass coverage responsibility. I kind of had this impression that they were going to just kind of make it a simple role for them and really look for someone that was aggressive, that could shed their blocks well, that could kind of get up to the line of scrimmage and clean things up. The fact that not only Baylon Spector showed a very impressive camp, but also showed that they had a kind of affinity to give him some pass responsibility too. Because if you saw, even though it didn't work out, the Diggs play at the end of camp yesterday, at least at the end of their scrimmage, where he was responsible for coverage. Like that shows you that they're at least trying to get him involved in that role in this defense. And the fact that you have Jordan Poyer speaking very highly of him as well is a really good sign for him going forward. And I feel like, myself included, when a lot of people were talking about linebackers, when a lot of people were talking about young defensive players, Spector kind of fell by the wayside. Like his name wasn't really brought up much. It wasn't really too like, oh, Balin Spector's the runaway. And there isn't really a runaway still, but
Not
it's
yet, no.
no, but it's nice to see that he's getting mentioned, that he's getting praise and getting looks. And I guess I have to ask you, Chris, because we talk about Balin Spector, but do you think he's the front runner? Do you think Terrell Bernard still has a shot? Like, where do you stand on the whole linebacker battle tonight?
It's so early still. I think that it's still at that stage where they're giving these guys equal looks and trying to see, how things play out. If I had to guess, you know, it's so hard, man, because I feel like they drafted, Terrell Bernard with the idea that he could fill one of those starting linebacker roles. Um, Dotson's been there the longest. I don't know. I honestly couldn't say. I think I'd have to probably, if you put a gun to my head, say Bernard. But the fact that Spector is making a play for it, and despite that great play to Diggs that with Spector in coverage, that's a pretty tough assignment, but he was showing a lot of coverage acumen aside from that play. So it's not like he, was put in there and um, just exposed. I mean, uh, the middle linebacker position is probably going to be a spot on the field that gets attacked this year, regardless, because whoever is starting there is going to be a full-time starter replacing someone who just got a huge contract and is well thought of and will be
Mhm.
looked at by other teams around the league as a downgrade. So I mean, they're going to test that spot no matter what. So to see him in there and getting uh, lined up across from Steve
Yeah.
Diggs, like you said, it'll be interesting certainly to see how this all plays out.
Absolutely. I mean, when you're going up against Diggs in camp and you have these young linebackers, it's really just a battle of who the hell is not going to get burned as badly as the next person. Like, you're not winning that battle as a linebacker in coverage, but if you could show at least some sort of stickiness, some sort of ability to hang, like, we'll take it, because you don't want to be in that position anyways. That's why I'm not like jumping over the moon or freaking out that Stephon Diggs just got open for a 50-yard touchdown, like on a linebacker. That's going to happen in any
He
game,
should
no
be
matter.
doing that, yeah.
I'd be worried about Diggs if Balin
Yeah.
Spector made a play on that ball, if Allen threw a good ball.
I
But
mean, he should be, he should be beating Shaq Leonard. I mean, he should be beating anybody that plays linebacker in the NFL.
exactly. But it brings something interesting up too, because when you talk about these young linebackers and kind of like their role in this defense, it's again, I want to bring it back to the fact that I did not think that pass coverage responsibility was going to be too much in their arsenal, because you talked about Tremaine Edmonds leaving. That does leave a huge hole in that part of the game. And I had thought that that responsibility is going to be designated to other players. It might not be. I mean, for all we know, they might really like Spector's aggressiveness and maybe his speed to cover the sides of the field, and he could be that person. But I want to shine some light on some other defensive players too that I think deserve some love. One of them being a very obvious Jordan Poyer, who's been having a great camp, seems to be fully healthy. Another obvious one in Rousseau, who we're all hoping takes that step forward, and I think he will. But another name, and I think this is going to be an interesting discussion. And chat, don't worry, we will get to offense. But Christian Benford deserves some love too. He had the hand injury. He missed a few games last year, but he's made some plays in camp, and he seems to be, if you're a Kaiir Elam stan who wants him to win that job, someone who just is not going away. Someone who just refuses to kind of break and be seen as a death piece and wants that starting job. So, Chris, what do you think about him as far as how he's playing in camp?
You mean he's not going to take Cam Lewis's spot and move over to safety? It's
Apparently not.
I mean, and not to mention Dane Jackson is in the way too. I mean, it's been tough for Kaiir Elam to uh do what it feels like the fan base expects him to do, which is to take that starting role at opposite of Trey White. But we have three guys who they seem to feel comfortable. I mean, it's still early. I mean, they're certainly trying Benford out. They see his traits, they see what he can do with the opportunity. Um, he was on the field at the beginning of last season as a rookie. So, you know, whether whether it's Jackson or Benford or Elam, it seems like we're going to have a starting caliber corner with two starting caliber corners in reserve, and that's just an embarrassment of riches compared to where this team was before the 2022 draft. Yeah, 2022 draft
Mhm.
where we took Elam. Going into that draft, it was like, well, what are we going to do here? And now we've got, Jackson, who has took another step forward, and they just can't get the guy off the field. These younger guys. Not that Jackson's old or anything. I mean, this is his 4th year coming up?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, 7th rounder. Benford was a 6th. The ability of Sean McDermott and this Bills coaching staff to coach up these guys and the scouts, right? To find these guys that maybe have been overlooked throughout the draft process or undervalued throughout the draft process, whether it's because they're from a small school like Benford or what, but it's wow, what a great spot to be in.
Absolutely. Christian Benford, Villanova legend. I think that's so
Yeah.
cool that we just have this kid from Villanova of all schools absolutely balling in our defense. And yeah, it bodes well to the secondary depth this year. Something I've been saying was a strong point of this team and something I'm very excited about is there is so much depth at cornerback and even at safety now. With now you have DeMar Hamlin coming back healthy. You add Taylor Rapp. Dean Marlowe is still on the team to go behind Poyer and Hyde. But then you look at this abundance of cornerbacks. A couple years ago, we were saying we need a CB2 and a CB3 and a CB4. Now we have all of those in stride. We might have too many. There might even be a trade candidate in this room, potentially a Dane Jackson, since he's only on the 1-year deal left. There's a lot of potential with the secondary that makes me very excited. But to see us, I'm blanking. Is it 6th or 7th round, Chris? I can't believe I didn't actually add this for Christian Benford. But to 6th round pick. Yeah. A 6th round pick stepping up to potentially be your starting CB2 at some point because he's just so physically gifted, and the fact that he can hang with really anybody is really exciting. But I also want to kind of add this. I'm not worried about Kaiir Elam. He did get first team reps in the last practice. Yeah, like he got first team reps in the last practice, and I still think it's just one of those things where it's handled with care. It's probably just a huge transition, and there's just time and adjustment that needs to be made for him to get his game set. So what do you think about Elam?
Well, these guys don't decide where they get drafted. It's a tough thing, and it happens all the time. Guys get expectations that are maybe too high, too fast, based on where they were drafted. Benford and Elam are both coming out of the same draft class. We already talked about Benford as someone who was probably overlooked, certainly undervalued as a 6th round pick. I don't know that I'm ready to say that Elam was overvalued. I just think that, he's clearly a good player. He makes plays when he's out there, and this is not, an indictment of his play at all. It just, we've got 2 other guys who are also making plays, and it's it's not, he's not making enough plays to put himself clearly ahead of those other 2 guys. And again, it's not something that worries me about Elam. It's just it's a happy problem to have with 2 other guys who are really showing out.
An embarrassment of riches, as you said before. And yeah, I think another thing too is you look at how this team drafts some of the players that they like to really find, whether that's in the first round, whether that's in later rounds. And they like projects, man. They have an I can fix you mentality, although I wouldn't really call it fixing as much as it's refining his game to this type of defense. And I think when you draft players of that caliber, that comes with a lot of patience needed because these players have to make such a stark transition. Again, we'll talk about it with Josh Allen being a project, probably the most obvious one. You talk about Spencer Brown, who was also a big project type of player. And then sometimes the projects fail and they don't work, or other times they mold into something at least serviceable to great. Kaiir Elam taking it, in the late first round, there are expectations that come with being a first round pick, which is why I understand concern. Why is our first round pick getting beat out by a 6th round pick of the same draft? He should be ready to go. I don't think we've seen enough yet to say that that's going to be the case. I do want to see more reliance on Kaiir Elam, but again, this is McDermott and Bean's team. They look at how you perform in practice. If they are not seeing that you are showing you're ready, that you're not understanding the playbook, especially because We lose Leslie Frazier, McDermott's at the helm. There might be even more new wrinkles that Elam didn't have last year that he has to relearn this year, and he might not be picking it up right away. If that's the case, it's going to take some time. I don't think Kaiir Elam deserves anything more than just a wait and see approach from our fan base yet, but I do understand some slight concerns, but I'm still confident that he's going to be playing this year, playing heavily this year, and making plays this year. So, yeah.
Yeah, we have a solid floor at least, right? I mean, if you have Dane Jackson out there, I mean, to me, it's like he's kind of setting the floor, and it's at a really, competent level for the CB2 position. And then you're looking at Elam and Benford as, the upside guys. Elam probably more so, right, based on his draft pedigree and the level of competition that he had in college versus what Benford was faced. Which of these guys is going to realize the ceiling of their ability, and that guy is probably going to be the long-term starter. And if they develop both of these guys into long-term starters, and maybe heir apparent to Trey White down the road, a few years down the road, when they're ready to either move him over to safety or whatever happens, for the sort of the twilight of his career, which is still far. I'm not saying it's like imminent or anything like that, but it's, I think when you're Brandon Beane and his staff you always have to be looking to the future, and developing guys into starters is how you win football games. So if you have too many guys you can start, that's not bad.
No, absolutely not. And a point I want to add to that too is it's never too early to start looking for that depth to eventually fill the void of someone who leaves as a veteran or maybe declines. And I'm not saying that Trey White's going to have that. I think Trey White is still all pro caliber cornerback, still going to be great in this league for a couple more years. But he's 28. You know that cornerback life cycle, similar to running backs, it declines pretty quickly. And they definitely have to have this on their radar at this point, especially when he had such a big knee injury last season. Right. I still think, again, I want to clarify, I still think White's going to be a great corner, still one of the best corners in the game. But it is time to at least be mindful of the fact that the cliff is approaching, and you need to be ready for that. And this could be a long-term answer. This could be someone that, while yes, he was drafted, as Sal earlier brought up here, he was a press corner in college and they play primarily zone. I do still think that Elam has traits that could fill in for White if he were to leave or eventually decline or whatever it may be. I also think that press ability is still going to be used in this defense because of some of the speedy receivers we have to deal with in this division. Thank God DeAndre Hopkins isn't in this division as well. It really just goes to show you that I think the Bills don't really care about where you're drafted as much as we need to see that you're ready. And it doesn't matter if you're a first round pick. It doesn't matter if you're the first overall pick. I hope we never get there. You got to show me something. If you're not showing me that you are capable of being on the field yet, then you're not going to get on the field. And it's frustrating as fans because, again, you see them, you wait for the draft, you see that we need a cornerback too. They address the position and it's not happening instantly. But again, he's been in the league for one season. He didn't play a full year because he did have to deal with an injury. He started to kind of pick it up towards the end of the year. Now McDermott's at the helm, might be adding some new things to the playbook and might be nursing him to get used to these changes, to get used to these new styles in the defense, these new wrinkles, which we'll talk about later, that he might just not be as prepared for as some of the other guys. And that happens. And maybe he's got to step it up. But I don't think we have any true indictment of Kaiir Elam in this defense yet. And again, someone referred to it before, when the pads come on, that'll be a big tell. But I have to ask you, Chris, anyone else on defense that stood out to you before we go to offense, which I know everyone is clamoring to hear us talk about a specific person who I think who I'm referring to?
I mean, well, you mentioned Groot earlier, and there's definitely lots of buzz around his play and just excitement about what he can do as he continues to take steps forward in his career. And the defensive end rotation in general, I'm very intrigued by, especially with not knowing when Von Miller is going to be back. But yeah, having Groot out there and then Epenesa maybe getting more run than we thought. We brought Leonard Floyd in, and the expectation was that he was immediately going to slot in as that starter opposite Greg Rousseau, at least until Von Miller comes back. And then Epenesa and Boogie Basham and Shaq Lawson, Kingsley Jonathan were going to sort of battle it out for those depth roles. It seems like the Bills still like AJ Epinesa way more than the fan base wants to admit. And I mean, I'm all for, um, them recognizing what he's been doing to progress throughout his career so far. I mean, AJ Epinesa had a sneaky good season last year. Um,
Mhm.
and if they're continuing to give him those opportunities with the first team, and it shows that they're recognizing that, and they want to see what he can do, and he might get more of an opportunity in the first part of this 2023 season than maybe we were expecting before camp started.
Yeah, Epineza is a great name. I'm glad you brought him up because that's, another case of when is he going to kind of show us something, right? And I've been one of those people who has said, like, I don't feel that we've gotten enough output from Epineza. I know he was a second round pick and we didn't have a first year. We got him because we gave that for Diggs. So we were waiting patiently. We took him. A lot of people praised the pick and said he was one of the most like slept on picks, late. He shouldn't have fallen that far. But naturally, with the expectations, and also for someone of his stature, 6'6", over 250 pounds, you're thinking this guy's going to be a monster, and he never really showed much. And I don't want to say that that's not that he could, but you're waiting for that explosive season. But again, you look at last season; it was a sneaky great year for him, especially when he was thrown into kind of being that patchwork starter when Von Miller got hurt. I think adding in more presence on the D line is going to benefit his game. And I think you're going to see him start this season. And I think it's because even though Vaughn wants to play week one, I'm a firm believer that he's not going to, nor should he have to, right?
Yeah.
Because your season's starting in MetLife and you're playing Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, and that's going to be a tough matchup. But at the same time, the first 4 weeks of the year, then you play the Raiders, then you're playing the Commanders, or name change pending, depending on what the owner wants to do. There's a couple of matchups in there where I feel like there's no reason to rush Vaughn back yet. We can let him sit, get the knee 100% healthy. We don't need to throw him into the fire on an unstable knee right away. And that's why I think you get Epenesa here, who's going to be your primary starter. And I think might thrive at the opportunity to, one, have these first team snaps, to be able to be the guy, get mentored by Vaughn in the background, but also show out in camp, but also a short up interior defensive line now that you have bring back a healthy Daquan Jones. At Oliver's lockdown, you add in Puna Ford, and on the other end, you have the tandem of Gregory Rousseau and then a Leonard Floyd. So bringing in this kind of assistance for him, I think could benefit him greatly. And I'm honestly excited to watch what he does this year. And I'm not expecting earth-shattering numbers. I don't think he'll get double-digit sacks this season because I just don't think there will be an opportunity to kind of be that productive when Von Miller's back. But I do think he could be rotationally disruptive and someone that I think could be very quality depth. And maybe that depth not fetching too high of a price could bode to the Bills potentially bringing him back. I don't know if you agree with this, Chris.
I mean, the Bills, they certainly like him. I mean, and the whole philosophy, draft, develop, resign. Um, I would not be surprised at all to see AJ's second contract, in Buffalo. Um, it's a contract year, so a lot is going to depend on how this year develops, how negotiations go, and but yeah, it's certainly on the table.
Mm-hmm. How funny would it be if, in contract year, he's just cleaning it up and every sack you look at it and you're like, yeah, God damn it. Because it's just like, you don't want, like, you obviously want him to succeed, but now if this man's cleaning it up and just finally breaks out, of course it has to happen in the contract year. And every sack is adding a couple 100,000, maybe 1 million to that deal.
Yeah, and like Spin said in the chat here, how much is AJ worth? We don't know yet.
Oh
Depends
man,
on,
dude.
yeah.
We could find that out and unfortunately be very disappointed with how expensive the contract could be, or it's depth as I expect it to be. Maybe similar production to last season and it doesn't fetch too much of a price. I think something affordable for the Bills, especially because with a player like him that's taken so long to develop and now you're talking about contract year and shows something, it could be a case of your Shaq Lawsons, your Jordan Phillips, the guys that work well in the Bills defense, but will that translate elsewhere? Do other teams want to pay the money to see if that will pan out? I don't know.
I guess there's a possibility that, if he shows out early in the season, and takes that trajectory where they think, okay, maybe this is going to be too big of an ask to find the money to re-sign him. maybe he becomes like a trade deadline sort of piece to move. It's tough on in a contract year. Someone would have to be looking for a guy that they need for the stretch run, and that's it, unless they've got they know they've got the cap to give him a long-term deal. But yeah, Jordan's saying here 6 years, $96 million.
Listen, if he has a good enough year to command that kind of money, he won't. That would, you know what? I wish him the best.
That's good for the Bills. If he's earning that kind of a contract, that's good for the Bills.
What do you think? What do you think the stat line would have to be to earn this kind of money? I'm going to throw this up again. What would AJ Epenesa have to finish with to get $96 million over 6 years? I don't know, man.
Yeah, I don't even know.
But yeah, all great points on defense. I'm hoping Epenesa can just be another serviceable defensive line piece. I think Greg Rousseau is going to have a great year. Again, we talked about Spector, Benford, talked about Jordan Poyer, some of these pieces on defense. I'm very excited to watch them. I'm really excited to watch Sean McDermott command the defense this year. But let's move over to offense, because this is the star of the show. I mean, yesterday they had a pretty good practice. There are a lot of names that could appear to be on this, surging offensive player list. But let's start with the obvious one. I know everyone wants to hear it, and this was my favorite comment so far, because Justin goes Kincaid, then follows it up with say Kincaid.
I saw that happening earlier. It's like right after I said Balin Spector. But I think you had asked me like what's surprising you. It's Balin Spector was the first name that came to mind. But man, Dalton Kincaid, he's as advertised. He's a first round pick. He's making first round pick types of plays. It's exciting.
Oh man, this guy. I know. I'm a big believer that prisoner of the moment exists. I'm a big believer that you can't judge camp too harshly. You can obviously be excited. You can obviously see things and be like, this could be good. And I don't want to gush over anybody. I don't want to do that, because I know that camp doesn't tell you the whole story. Things change dramatically when the pads come on and when there's regular season games at stake. But it is so hard not to be excited about Dalton Kincaid. And I understand completely why this fan base is pumped. He looks good, Chris. He just looks freaking good. Just to put it as simple as possible. He looks like a smooth route runner. He has great hands. He has a fluid movement when he runs. The type of guy that can get open in space. The type of guy that is just going to thrive off of having other playmakers around him, having another capable tight end next to him. He's going to allow them to have these creative formations, more 12 personnel, which we've been seeing them run in camp. I mean, I don't think there is anything I could say negatively about how Kincaid has performed in practice so far. They are very clearly trying to get him integrated into the offense as quickly as possible. I think he has the hands, and building this rapport with Josh Allen, where he's going to be the sure-handed slot option like we've all expected. It feels like a dream is coming true, and I'm knocking on wood because I just need this man to stay on the field and be good. But yeah, talk to me about Kincaid, what you're thinking about him, just some of the things that you've been impressed by so far.
Swole Beasley, man. Everyone was talking about we need that to address that slot position and going into the draft. And I mean, tight end was not really on many people's radar, but it's like you bring this guy in and all of a sudden he can you can have him and Knox on the field at the same time. You've got like you were talking about, so much versatility in what you can do with the formations. I mean, I think we even saw like a 0 running back, 2 tight end formation getting thrown out there. That's some kind of creativity that we just haven't really seen much, and we've been kind of looking forward to. And Ken Dorsey going into his second year now with a bunch of new tools in the toolkit. I mean, we're talking about Kincaid, but like we're eventually going to talk about Sherfield, Hardy. Like these guys, they give the offense a lot of opportunity to mix it up. And the centerpiece being that first round pick spent on Kincaid. He's going to be a matchup nightmare, especially if you're talking about having Dawson Knox on the other side too. Like teams are going to have a hard time defending the 12 personnel looks that the Bills put out there.
Absolutely. Again, and a part of that is Knox. And I think Knox, again, I very huge fan of his game. I think he's capable of getting open. I think he's aggressive. He matches up well on linebackers and slot corners. I have full faith in Dawson Knox. But one point that I think it might have been Judge that brought this up, someone in our circle, was that they still got to get Knox the ball too. And he still has to get open, because that's how this thing works too. We all say Kincaid plugs into the 12 personnel and all of a sudden you can run it. But that happens if Dawson Knox is getting open, which I think he will. But I'm really glad you brought up some of the creative looks, because we've seen them do diamond formations and some screens. I know. And you're just seeing kind of how Dorsey's getting creative with how he's grouping these people together and how he's putting people out on the field. I know there was one, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he had Dawson Knox take a handoff or something along those lines. There was a lot that they're doing in camp that I feel like they're experimenting with, but I think it's showing you, one, that adding in someone like Kincaid to go along with the weapons you have is going to create the opportunity for this offense to kind of turn into this like biblically accurate angel offense where it just changes forms constantly and looks completely different from one play to the next, that they're going to dictate what they want to do based on what they're seeing, which is something that we need, because that's how you can just truly have an unstoppable offense, is take what the defense is giving you. Sounds simple, but that seemed to be something that they strayed away from due to the limitations of Allen's elbow injury, and, you know, Dorsey being a first-year play caller and trying to figure it out, maybe some of the interior protection not working out. You get to see that, but you also just get to see just how formidable they can be. And again, if Dorsey takes that step forward in year 2 and gets a bit more creative and offers you some new looks, maybe in the red zone, maybe just in certain parts of the field, that's really just going to open things up. And having someone like a Kincaid or some of the other guys I'll mention, like Shearfield, Hardy, like 2 players that have also been showing out in camp, I just feel like it becomes a situation where it's like, not so much how do you stop the Bills offense, but can they make mistakes that keep them from moving forward, which any team will. But if it's in your hands, I think that makes you feel a lot more confident. Would you say so, Chris?
Sorry, Joe, you froze there for a second for me, but sorry for the pause.
All
so, yeah, I mean, a lot of how the Chiefs find success is a lot of exotic formations. Even if the play itself ends up being kind of fundamental or simple, they're giving you all these different formations, different pre-snap looks, different alignments and motion, and it's, you can see the Bills trending more in that direction, which is really exciting because, I mean, so much of what the defense sees is pre-snap, and so much of how, like, the way that they're defending you, it is dependent on what happens before the snap. And then, so you want them to be guessing what's going to come next. And you don't want them to feel like they have a read on what you're going to show them after the snap. So, yeah, it's really cool to see that we saw Gabe Davis line up in the backfield. Like, there's some cool stuff happening just in the first few days of camp.
Definitely. Chris, can you hear me okay right now?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So for everyone in the chat, I want to apologize. I'm hardwired to my router, but sometimes it has blips, has little quips, I guess you can call it. So if I do freeze or anything, I do apologize. Normally we have no issues, but every dog has its day, and I guess my router chose today. But yeah, no, again, it's the versatility of the offense is something I'm very excited for. And I've been saying this on this show when we did free agency episodes, when we did a view on the running backs, on the receivers, but it feels like they are addressing and directly attacking, by the moves they've made, all of the weaknesses that showed on film last year, right? So you talked about interior protection. Well, they're beefing that up with a guy like Osiris Torrance, another person that our chat has been clamoring about, and rightfully so. He is getting first team reps, and that's very exciting to see, because Osiris Torrance is an incredibly physical run blocker, and pass blocking ability needs work, but I do think that could be shored up. He's just such a big presence. You're seeing them kind of attack this idea that they were a bit soft in the trenches last year, and kind of a soft team that couldn't really run as effectively, which isn't totally true. They were a good running team. They just kind of strayed away from it. But they are a team that seems to only run versus light boxes. And when teams adjusted, it was, okay, we're going to go fully pass until they come out of it. And, that becomes predictable. That becomes kind of a one-trick pony style. Now it feels like they are using guys like Torrance, guys like Kincaid, motions with guys like Hardy, creative looks to just make it so that instead of us being seen as this soft team, we are a team that can control this game as we want to. And there were flashes of it last year, but now I think it's actually coming into fruition, and we're going to see it more so when the pads come on, how creative they can truly get. But more about Torrance, Chris. Again, first team reps, which is very exciting. What does Osiris Torrance being on the first team reps and maybe, potentially starting in this role mean to you as far as what they could do offensively and how you could see this affecting Ryan Bates in this offense?
Yeah, it would be amazing if Torrance can win that starting job. I feel like that's the ideal, right? I feel like that's what the Bills want to happen because I think they see Ryan Bates as more of a long-term replacement for Mitch Morse. And you know, while um that particular role is, on the horizon. In the meantime, they like him as that depth guy that can fill really in any spot along the interior. And if you really needed him to finish a game at the tackle spot, you're not going to maybe love the results, but like you can put him out there. Like, he knows the position. So if you have Torrance who's able to start, then you have Bates who is also starting caliber in reserve. I mean, that's just huge. The injuries happen every year on the offensive line. If you have 6 guys or more who can, go out there and get you meaningful snaps, that's a great spot to be in.
Firmly agree. And that's something, again, if you've watched the show every week, I talk about it every week, but it's just a great talking point because it's true and probably something you're going to see this year is Bates to me is someone that's far more valuable to be moved around the line. The patchwork guy that can go wherever you need him. Do you need him to play tackle? Do you need him at another guard spot? Do you need him at center? You're going to need him at center. It's not a can we use him? You're going to. I love Mitch Morse. I think Mitch Morse is one of the best centers in the league, and he's huge in this offense. But Mitch Morse gets hurt. It's just something you've seen each year. It's a trend now. He will get hurt, maybe a concussion, maybe some sort of soft tissue injury, and go down for a couple of games. He toughs it out. He's a commendable player. This is not me shading him in any sort of way. But, for your starting center, there's going to be a time where he might get an injury that might be nagging, and you might need Ryan Bates to take that spot. And that's what you get with the budding development of Osiris Torrance, which gets me really excited because that just means you don't have to freak out as much. Like, Bates is a capable center in his own right. He can hold it down. If he's capable of doing that, then that's great because that would mean, one, Osiris Torrance is playing the right guard and he's doing a good job or good enough job to be a starter. And two, that just means you have no drop off or at least very minimal drop off at center play because Bates and Allen still have a good rapport too. So Torrance taking that step forward is, in my eyes, probably the most important development, at least one of the most important developments for this offense as a whole this year. And Chris, I want to bring up another group of players here because I've mentioned their names quickly, but they're the talking points of camp. And this is kind of an underrated receiver matchup that, when I had Mike and Kevin on last week, we talked about it. But Sherfield, Hardy, and now we talk about Khalil Shakir. We're bringing up the sacred name that our fans absolutely adore, and rightfully so, because we want to see him do well. But I mean, give me your thoughts on this matchup. All of them have seemed to do pretty well in camp so far, but do you see a front runner? Do you see kind of an outcome where someone doesn't make the team? Like, what do you think on this?
It's tough. I mean, so the contract that they gave to Deontay Hardy means to me that they want him on the field on offense, a meaningful amount. Like, maybe he's not the always the first guy out there in 11 personnel, but he's probably going to have meaningful snaps in every game, which whether it's in that gadget role or taking some slot snaps or even lining up outside. I mean, that's one of the things that we talked about when he got signed, that he has, the ability to flex out into the out wide. But the camp so far has shown us that the Bills are willing to line him up, and whether it's in the slot or out wide. And I think you can say the same thing about all 3 of these guys, Sherfield, Shakir, and Hardy. They're versatile. You can line them up in different spots, and it goes more to what we were talking about with the different looks. You don't want ideally to have so one guy's presence on the field signal to the defense that, okay, this is what we're going to see. So if you've got all 3 of these guys that can play, inside out, it just gives you more options. And if I had to bet, I still think that Hardy's probably going to get the most offensive snaps of the 3 of them. But, Sherfield is definitely making a case. And Shakir, the Bills already like him a lot. So, I mean, I feel like all 3 of them are going to have some sort of a role.
Definitely. And Kevin made a great point on the show last week, or it was Kevin or Mike, one of the two. So I'll just say Kevin and Mike because I don't want either one to feel left out if they were the one that actually made this point last week. But they said something along the lines about like when you have Dalton Kincaid, obviously being one of your tight ends, that means that like your wide receiver 3, 4, 5 is wide open because Kincaid's essentially going to be your other slot receiver. So it's like you don't have to kind of worry as much about it. Like finding a place for them on this team, like that spot is open for them. So it's really just who's going behind Davis and like how far do you go in the wide receiver depth chart, which you're obviously going to go pretty deep. I think, like you said, Hardy's going to have the most snaps. I think that just makes sense, whether it's return duty now that Nyheim Hines got injured, or if you want to talk about maybe not having him be a full return guy, which I have kind of this belief that he's not going to be, even though he was an all-pro. I do understand that he's talented, but that was also back in 2019. I think they want Hardy to have a specific receiver role in this offense and maybe avoid being in the backfield to return, punts or kick returns, whatever it is, because I think they want to actually use him to his full potential in the receiving core. So for me, like Hardy, I think would get the most snaps of that group. I think you have him kind of as this enhanced McKenzie role where it is gadget, where it is motion, moving him around, but also you could have him be in the slot if you need him to be, or even have him go up in the boundary because he's just incredibly quick and maybe could split defenders up top and get open, which is something he did in New Orleans, something I think he could do in Buffalo. But Sherfield is making a case, and there was never any knock on, Sherfield being bad receiver, needed to prove himself. Like he was very capable in Miami. They called upon him. He was their main slot guy. But I think now being in this offense where that role isn't exactly as clear cut for him, I still think you could find ways to rotate him into, onto the field, whether that's Kincaid has to come off, whether you want him and Kincaid in the same package to attack the middle of the field. And he's proven that he's sure-handed without gloves, which is crazy to me, by the way. The fact that he's able to do that makes me confident that they want to work him in. But also, again, he's a great run blocker. I think this team is trying to get more physical. This team is trying to be more of a bully ball type team when they can be. And I think he's going to play into that role as well. But Shakir, again, if he's having a good camp, whether that's return duty, whether that's rotating him into the field for certain snaps, I don't really know yet. But I don't think that we should, brush him off or shy away from Khalil Shakir. I think they do value him. I think they do want to find a place for him on this team. Whether that's being kind of the Bates of the receiving core is to be seen. But that's kind of what I see him becoming. But all in all, I mean, it's a good battle and one that makes me happy just because it's not like you're talking about praying these guys prove themselves. I think these guys are all fully capable, ready to go starters that could really bolster the depth of this receiving core. So I'll just ask you, Chris, I mean, any other offensive guys that you want to bring up before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, let's not forget about Justin Shorter too, as one of, he's a guy that I expect will make the team based on, where he was drafted and just the what I feel like they see when they look at Justin Shorter. I mean, they were clearly interested in him going into the draft, and I feel like they think they got a deal on him where he was drafted. So it's going to be, to me, like it seems like the top 6 receivers are set. Even though there's a lot of camp left, things could happen, of course. It's more of a question in my mind of whether they keep 7 receivers or not.
Yeah, and we'll see. I mean, if not immediately, maybe Shorter's a practice squad stash. I'm not sure. But one thing
yeah, he's one of those guys that because sorry to interrupt you there, but I don't know if part of it depends on whether he makes plays in the preseason, right? And there's always this fear of, there's always this sort of overblown fear, right? That guys are going to get claimed when you try to send them down to the practice squad. But yeah, Justin Shorter is a big trait C receiver who had a really high pedigree coming out of high school. He's somebody that I would be a little nervous about if you try to get him down to the practice squad.
Yeah, I mean, the positives of Justin Shorter's game, again, he was playing with Anthony Richardson in Florida, right? So he's a fantastic deep ball tracker. That's kind of his bread and butter. You're playing with one of the best deep ball quarterbacks, if not the best deep ball quarterback in the NFL with Josh Allen. So I'm kind of excited to see how they use him in the boundary depth, because obviously that's Gabe Davis's role, that's Stephon Diggs' role, but there will be times where they're going to have Shorter line up wide and maybe try to see if you could send him up the seams and what he can do, because I think he's capable of doing that role well. But where I see some benefit to him is the red zone. I mean, he's a big boy. And you're talking about guys like you could have these packages where it's Shorter, it's Knox, it's Kincaid, and maybe Davis, and just terrorize teams that might not have like adequate size linebackers or corners, and talk about just size mismatches in the red zone, something that I think would help Allen greatly, where, just having a big body who's just getting his hands up and throwing a high pass is kind of all you need to do in that moment. So,
Yeah, and
yeah,
the thing with Shorter too is that they can see him potentially as heir apparent if they're unable to get a deal done with Gabe Davis. Um, that's sort of a high expectation, of course, but it's a possibility. It's within the range of outcomes.
yeah, and the knock on him is he's kind of like, again, use this term, but one trick pony, right? Like he didn't line up too many other spots of the field. He's primarily a vertical boundary receiver, but you do need that. Like that is something that can be beneficial. And again, you talk about having Allen, you talk about an explosive, run first offense in Florida. That's not to say that he couldn't mold his game and develop a bit more into a true like deep threat in the NFL. I think the offense he was playing in, the numbers he's outputting were just a byproduct of being in a run first offense, and he still made some plays. So, I won't write off the idea that he could be the heir apparent to Gabe Davis, but to me, I would rather keep Gabe Davis. But
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna avoid going on another rant about him, Chris, because last week we had like a whole, I want to say 5 minute, like our ears were smoking and we were all just defending Davis. So I think people who watch the show know how I feel about him, but I could see the outcome where if he prices himself out of Buffalo, that maybe they want to run Shorter at that spot. But one player I just have to bring up first before we move on, because we haven't said his name and he deserves a ton of love, is James Cook. I mean, James Cook has been great in camp so far. And I think one of the things that I'm seeing, just based on what I've been reading and watching, and I haven't been there, unfortunately, but I would love to see it in person, it's just that him and Josh Allen are kind of getting in sync. And that was something that I think a lot of fans could agree felt like there was a lack of last year. Almost like we weren't really giving Cook as many snaps as we wanted to, maybe because he was a rookie still learning. You had Singletary, you had Moss at the time that turned into Hines. And it felt like Cook kind of got buried in the depth chart to start. And that kind of dependence on him slowly grew as the year went on. But of course, when you're not getting as many, opportunities in the offense, that means your quarterback's not throwing to you as often, means that chemistry isn't there. Now, in our first few days of camp, it feels like they are really trying to hammer down this chemistry in both the running and passing game. And I think that could not only work wonders for Cook as a player, but work wonders for Allen, because it's almost like we talk about security blankets and layups, but James Cook, apart from being like one of the guys like Dalton Kincaid or any of those guys that get open, could be open at your side and also break off for big plays. So your thoughts on James Cook this year, Chris?
I'm very excited to see Cook in that 1A role, which it seems he firmly has, based on the first few days and how they've been using him. I mean, Damian Harris seems like he's also going to get some run, probably in that 1B role, to kind of like Cook taking over the snaps that Singletary had last year, and maybe Harris taking over Cook's snaps. Maybe the split is more in Cook's favor than it was last year, but the Bills like to have that running back by committee. I mean, I've always been a really big fan of James Cook and his game. So I I'd love to see him get the ball more, especially out of the backfield. I think that he provides Josh with such, like you said, a safety blanket, a safety valve that plays break down. You've got someone who you can check it down to, who can legit make people miss and make a broken play into a 10 or 15 or more yard gain, but also design pass plays to Cook, because he's
Mm-hmm.
such a good receiver out of the backfield. He's got great hands. He's great at running routes. I mean, it's like, he's almost like a receiver back there. So I just love I love that we're going to be seeing more of him, and I'm curious to see ultimately how much of the snap share he gets.
Yes, and one thing that I think could develop with James Cook, as I alluded to before, is a viable screen game, something that was
Mhm.
also missing from this Bills offense. I cannot begin to tell you how exciting it could be and what the potential would be for this offense if that's clicking as well. They ran it in practice. You saw it succeed with James Cook and Damian Harris, so you know that they're both capable of doing so. But having a speedster like Cook, someone who you give him the ball in space and he's going to try and find ways to get open, couple that with the potential of this offensive line being a better run blocking line, man, get like it's so hard to predict it. It's early. We know the pads aren't on yet, but like think of the prospect of what that could mean for this
Oh yeah,
offense. It's
yeah.
huge.
You mentioned chemistry, and so much about a screen game is timing and rhythm, and it's repetition and chemistry. So him developing that more with Josh Allen, like you said, I mean, the Bills have had a screen game. It's just been with the wide receivers, and
Mhm.
if we can work the running backs into that screen game, it just gives you more versatility, it gives you more looks that the defense has to prepare for.
Yep, and don't forget, Hardy has also lined up in the backfield in certain snaps in camp. I think backfield screens with Hardy might also be a thing as well, and they should be because he is fast, lightning fast. And you have seen in Bills offenses of the past with Allen, them trying to get screens off with fast players with McKenzie and John Brown, which have succeeded in the past. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that this year. And as you said, repetition. Repetition is the key to mastery. Shout out to Zenyatta and all of my Overwatch players that are in the chat right now. Now, there is a conversation going on in our chat, Chris, that I'm glad people are bringing the name up. I'm glad people are bringing this topic up because it's something that I think with the recent news this week, we have to talk about it. And that is the Bills' quest for a returner because we unfortunately have lost Nyheim Hines for the season, which, by the way,
I'm
if
bummed, man.
oh my God. I was so upset. I know I was in the chat defending the returner, thinking it was a bigger deal. Like, I know people don't kind of brush it off. We watched as this team struggled with consistency from the return position. I value it very much. And I think that losing Hines was annoying. It's not a crippling blow by any means, because
Right.
again, like you can find someone to at least be capable. But I loved what Nyheim Hines could bring to the offense as a whole beyond just his returning ability. And also the way it went down is just so incredibly shitty. I feel
Mhm.
terrible for him. And like, I hope if he somehow sees this, just know like best wishes, Naheem. I hope you heal up because that is just, I feel terrible for the guy. But yeah, sorry, Chris, go on.
No, I mean, I was just gonna echo what you're saying there. It's just a really unfortunate situation, and you feel for him.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, that's like just unlucky, man. So unlucky. But unfortunately, with the injury and the fact that he can't play this year, you're looking for a returner. And I know a lot of people have kind of brushed it off and said, well, they could just have Hardy do it. But I'm in the camp that I don't want Hardy to do it. I don't. I don't want a guy who just came off a year where he was hurt for a majority of it to be the guy returning punts for this team, especially if this offensive coordinator or even this team in general has higher expectations and plans for Hardy's role in the receiving core this year. It's the kind of the same boat with Micah Hyde. Like, were there positions where Hyde had to? Yeah, but I didn't want Hyde being the primary guy. He's your starting safety. I
Right.
don't want any valuable player in this offense to be the one returning punts or returning kicks, which is why and I think they're kind of trying to stray away from that because they go out and they go sign Andy Isabella, the name that has been in this chat kind of fuming right now. And you talk about other players like Darrington Evans that they also signed. And now apparently working out and maybe bringing in N'Keal Harry, who I doubt it, but still, just like other bodies they're bringing in. So, Chris, like, talk to me about your perspective of the return game, like, just who could be the person to take that role.
It's really too early to say, right? They brought in Andy Isabella. I think I tend to agree with Spin here in the chat that he's probably more of a camp body, but if he's getting opportunities to return punts and kicks, it's an indication that they might be looking at him as a potential roster candidate. Um, so when Andre Roberts was the return specialist, they didn't use him at all on offense. Nyheim Hines did get used on offense despite a lot of people's ire at the coaching staff. He didn't get a ton of touches, but he was on the field quite a bit. Certainly way more than Andre Roberts was. And it signaled to me that, of course, the Bills are willing to use their return specialist on the offense. So, I mean, guys like Khalil Shakir and Deontay Hardy are candidates. They're in the mix. I tend to agree with you that anyone who has more of a featured role on the offense, like maybe what we expect Deontay Hardy to be, it's risky to put him out there in the return game, especially someone who has had injuries trouble in the past. So uh, I don't know, man. I'm that's a big question mark right now. But at the same time, it's sort of, while the return position is important, um, if your floor is just fair catching it, which you can do on punts or kickoffs now, then it's not one of the most important battles that we have to, but it is a battle. It'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, and it's also like that's the byproduct of being a good team is we're hyper focusing on the return battle because like what else besides like def wide receiver and linebacker is there to really call a true battle? I mean, def corner, sure, but like it's just to me, I'm viewing the return game as imagine having just a true speedster, someone who's one good at protecting the football, two able to get down the field quickly, and putting this offense in better field position. Like it's more the idea of what the upside the upside that a good, solid, stable return man brings for you. And yes, they did, when McKenzie was returning, he was still in the offense. Hides had to do it before. I know Andre Roberts never got used, but it's a mixed bag of, I think it's not so indicative that they're going to have this person come in and be a sole returner, but that's really just what I would want. And I think the fact that you got Darrington Evans, Andy Isabella, and other guys like that are coming in, working out, and getting like camp opportunities with this team, I have a feeling that it's just let's see if they have any spark or pop that they could be a designated return specialist, because that's what Hines' role was really going to be. It's not that he wasn't going to get any play in this offense, but Hines was running back 4. And I feel like if you went with like the Darrington Evans, you just continue that same trend where you add in like extra running back depth for the sole reason of being returner. And they did 4 running backs last year, with one of their running backs being mainly special teams, not returning, but Tywan Jones was on the teams. So I see a world where maybe they just want to keep the consistency of that concept, maybe for depth chart reasons. Maybe it's just simpler to kind of remember that it's still 4 running backs and go with Evans. But maybe it's also beneficial to bring in someone like Isabella. And I know he hasn't really had the career that a lot of people were optimistic about when he came out of college, but having him as maybe a return specialist with the upside to be depth in the slot or deep is there, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, has Isabella done much in the return game? I thought I saw that he hadn't, and it was more of a projection than anything else. That he's a shifty, speedy guy, so he could return punts and kicks, but I don't know that he's had much in the way of meaningful experience in that role. So it might be wish casting, but we'll see.
Maybe so, but I think the whole knock on him was he has like great vertical speed, and I think that's really just in concept, when you talk about a kick returner, that's really it. It's great vertical speed and also being 5'9". It's just like, it's like covering me in like, I don't know, butter and getting me to run down the field, only I'm not nearly as fast. But if you have like an elusive downfield speed guy like Andy Isabella, and as long as he could secure the football, I think that's all they want out of him. But,
and make the right choice on when to, right. I mean, because that's something that we saw with Nyheim Hines on a couple of punts, and just like fielding it when you shouldn't, and taking like there is definitely a component to securing the ball. Like you said, you need to be able to secure the ball. That means picking the spot. When does it make sense to call a fair catch? When does it make sense to let the ball bounce out of the back of the end zone on a kickoff? Or so that is a huge component, and that's why I say it's a little bit of forecasting. If you don't have that experience already, you have to prove that you're able to catch the ball, obviously, but also make the right choice as to when to and what to do in each situation.
Yeah, agreed. And you have to have the IQ for it. So if Isabella was brought in with that in mind and he's not showing it, easy cut. And I wish him the best. It's just more so like, I think the potential for what he could be is there. But yeah, if it's more about like finding the sure-handed guy, then Evans just makes the most sense. He really does. Like, it's just, again, plug and play RB4, someone that is depth in that room, because that, there's some injury questions with Damian Harris. Latavius Murray is generally pretty stable, but it's always good to have the depth. And if he can hold on to the ball and he's a speedster, then why not? But yeah, we're going to have to see. It's still really early on, and we'll see how they shake out the matchups and, who's getting those snaps in camp. But one thing I want to talk to you now about, Chris, is a certain player that I had referenced before, a very polarizing name, Von Miller. So Von Miller, you've been seeing him work to the side. He obviously started camp on the pup. He is not 100% yet, but he's very much working back to. He said himself he didn't want to be on the pup list, but obviously couldn't avoid it. So, I mean, I guess I want to ask you, Chris, just give me your thoughts on like the approach with Von Miller. I know we talked about week one, maybe not rushing him back, but do you think there's a scenario where he does come back? Is it likely? And also, would you even want that if he's ready?
Well, can I ask you first? You said he was a polarizing name. Is there have I missed a portion of the fan base that's like out on Von Miller or something like that?
No, more so just his name is coming up every single time. Maybe not the right word, but he's just whenever you bring him up, everyone's asking about his knee. There's obviously videos of him working off to the side. Just one of the most significant names is a better word for that.
Okay, yeah, and differing opinions too on the strategy for bringing him back. That I'm with you now. And I think I tend to agree more with what I think you believe in that. I'd be conservative with bringing him back, and certainly more so. I certainly wouldn't listen to Von as far as when he's ready, because he is the king of of positive, yeah, the king of positivity and life affirmations, and all power to him, man. I love that. I love his mindset, but I want the team doctors to play it safe with him and make sure that that knee is fully healed and put him in a position to be with the team down the stretch, which is where we really need him. The end of the season, in the playoffs. If he starts on the pup list, I'm not going to be mad about it. It'll be a significant loss in the first part of the season. There's no question. I mean, he's a he's a Hall of Fame caliber player, and his absence will certainly be felt. But it also gives an opportunity for AJ Epinesa to step up in a contract year and really show out and prove to the Bills that he's worth it for that second contract, or prove to other teams that they should shell out some cash to bring him over. So I think the motivation will be huge. Not that he was a guy that needed help getting motivated before or anything like that. I'm not saying that, but the opportunity would be huge for him, and I think that it would be really interesting to see how he performs with that opportunity. Not to mention seeing Leonard Floyd on the defense and what he can do. Because when Von comes back and you've got both of those guys hopefully still healthy, how does the rotation how does the rotation work with those top four and maybe DN5, depending on how many guys they keep and who they keep. So yeah, long story short, I'm all for playing it safe with Von and seeing how things develop throughout that first part of the season, making sure that we've got him healthy for the stretch.
Completely agree. One thing that doesn't get talked about enough too is, do you really want Von coming back to MetLife Stadium for his first game on a bum knee? Because I sure as hell do not want him even touching that turf. I know he survived last year. I don't want anybody playing on that. I'm so glad, first and foremost, that we are not going to do what we did in 2019, which is back-to-back MetLife games. Yeah. I'm so glad that we get MetLife off the schedule week one, and maybe the guys that are like banged up or something, like, don't go out there and touch that turf. I don't want to. Although I think, if I'm not mistaken, Chris, they recently changed it, not to grass, but they like upgraded it or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
I'm not a MetLife fan, so that's besides the point. But when I think about Von Miller and how you approach it, I think, like you said, it's just way better to be cautious, way better to be safe, because Von is your clincher. He is your cleanup defensive end that is meant to be that impact player on those end of game crucial moments. You saw it in Kansas City, and honestly, every game he played last season, you saw his name at least once making like a very key play, whether we capitalized on it or not. That varied by game. Obviously, Jets strip sack, interception immediately after, so you don't really remember it, but that was a huge play in that game that, had the offense had a semblance of competence, that would have been what we talked about. So for me, Von Miller does not need to be rushed back. And I think, like you alluded to, with other guys like Epenesa potentially stepping up, or even Leonard Floyd, which you brought him in for a reason, that defensive line depth is, in my opinion, shored up enough for at least the start of the year where there is no reason to rush Von back, because I still think they're going to be a productive unit. And you look at the interior, you look at Ed, but you look at adding in Poona Ford, right? So you have that depth there. You talk about the already great presence of Daquan Jones. You talk about McDermott also just potentially being more aggressive and just adding in more pressure packages where maybe even if the defensive line isn't at its peak as far as pass rush productivity goes, you could still maybe bring some linebackers up and just have these packages where McDermott is kind of masking it and they're still effective at getting to the quarterback or causing pressure that you don't need to rush Von back. And then when Von does come back, it's one, great because now you have a Hall of Fame edge rusher to boot, but also you went a few weeks without him. The defense was getting creative without him. Now you've only watched tape on a Von-less Bills defense. He's coming back. And now you have to prepare for him in addition to what McDermott can throw at you. So like, yeah, as I talk about it, I'm even more like, there's not a doubt in my mind. Like, don't bring him back week one. Let Von sit for a few weeks. Let him get 100% because the upside to what he'll bring is just way bigger than rushing him back for a Jets game in week one, which, yeah, it's divisional. Yeah, but it's also week one. There's so much time left.
Right. I mean, imagine the Bills, 5-1, tied for first atop the AFC, and all of a sudden, oh, now we get Von Miller back in the mix. It's I mean, obviously, we don't know what's going to happen. We can't predict the future, but that's in my heart, what is a realistic possibility.
Mm-hmm. Oh, also, this is a good point too. I don't know if we'd wait that long because that's quite a long time. But
we have a late buy this year, right?
Very late buy. Yeah. Pretty sure it's end of November or early December. I'd have to look again.
12 or 13, something like that.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, him coming after the bye, that's probably the most insane stretch we have during the year because I'm pretty sure in that time we play New England, Miami, Dallas, Kansas City, and the Chargers. I'm pretty sure that's all post-bye. So yeah, it'd be great to have a healthy Von for that stretch, but at the same time, like it's not going to take that long. I will say this though, he had a comment in his presser where he was saying he was trying to be back. I think it was no later than week 6. So I also think like as far as the spectrum of when he comes back is still wide open, like wide open. I don't think it's going to be like, he misses week 1. He might be back week 2. I think if he's not playing week 1, you might not see him for the first month or even like month and a half of the season, which like, again, as long as they're disruptive, as long as the defense looks good, so be it. Because I think even without Von, McDermott calling the plays whenever he did for this defense, they were still able to be effective when he wasn't on the field. It's just more so having him is just that huge boost that already can help a very good defense on paper.
Yeah, our schedule, I just pulled up our schedule just to remind, our bye is in week 13 and December 3rd is the bye. Man, we have a tough schedule. I mean, I knew it was tough, but especially like you said, after the bye, Chiefs, Cowboys, Chargers coming out of the bye.
Yeah,
man. So if we're gonna miss him like that at the beginning of the season, you've got Jets, Raiders, Commanders. The Dolphins and Jags are both pretty good.
That's tough. Yeah.
Giants. Then you got Patriots and Bucks. So I don't know, man. You definitely don't want to wait too long, right? Because you want him to be able to feel like he's. It takes a little bit of time, right, to get up to that mid-season peak form. So I agree that I wouldn't wait until after the bye to bring him back. But if that's what he needs, then sure. I just like someone, you've had comments in the chat here talking about what he's been doing on the bike and stuff. And yeah, Pops Mafia talking about, what he's been doing on the side in camp. And he has looked good. Like it certainly looks like he's progressing well and hasn't had any setbacks, right? Because what we have seen has been positive. It's just, I mean, and I guess as a defensive end too, right? As a player that is more proactive than reactive on the field, that's a positive when you're coming back from an injury like this. It's tougher for a guy like Trey White who has to be reactive as a corner. It's tougher to build that confidence in your knee. But for Von, who he's making that first step, he knows what he wants to do off the snap. That that's to his advantage.
Absolutely. And I think it was Banged Up Bills on Twitter. Pretty sure it was them who said that Von looks further along now than Trey did at this point. And we had like, I remember people saying Trey could be back at the start of the year. I remember people saying it could be 4 weeks. It does breed some optimism as far as his timetable to see, someone who's obviously doing that consistently say that his knee is looking right. But yeah, it's not even, again, and I said this with Trey a bunch of times, but I'll say it for Von too. While he might not be a cornerback, you still got to have full confidence on both of your knees, right? Like you're talking about a position where you have to cut, shift, move around, very sudden starting and stopping on your joints, on your knees, on your ankles, on your feet, whatever it is. And when you have an ACL tear, that's going to mess you up mentally. Like it just is. That's an injury that you're working back from that, it's a pop. It's literally something that in the blink of an eye can happen. When you're Von Miller at your, age of, I think he's 33 right now, going to be 34 towards the start of the year or I don't quite remember, but late
vice
30s.
Versa?
I was about to say
34
vice
to
versa. Vice versa is not the right word. The coffee is not fully activated yet and bit tired. So yes, vice versa. No. But when you talk about like his later on in his age, being for a defensive end, like that has to ring true in your mind. It has to be something that you consider when you're playing. And I think that is something that's tough to overcome because even if you're back on the field, let's say you get cleared and they tell you you're 100% good to go. I have no doubt in my mind that Von's going to be hungry to get out there, that he's going to be, trying his damn hardest every single play like he already does. But that's going to be in the back of your mind and it's going to take some time to overcome that. So I'm curious if when he does come back, is it better for him to be called 100% and still take time from a game, or if he's just going to come right in and just try to work out those nerves immediately? That's to be seen. But there was a comment here I wanted to bring up and I'm going to look for it. Yes. So just talking about our schedule, I'd rather the tough part at the end of the schedule, along with the bye when we need the week off before the playoffs. The bye part I agree with. I don't agree with the tough part at the end of the schedule, though. I think I'd like a nice soft cupcake end of the schedule. Maybe something that you
put
can
some
feel
new wrinkles in, start to mess around and see if what kind of packages you might want to develop for the playoffs.
Yeah, when you're the Chiefs playing Ring Around the Rosie in a football game, like that's the kind of thing I'd want for the Bills. Not, like going through the rock bottom in SpongeBob where like in the movie where they go and it's all the monsters. That's what the end of the schedule feels like. And yeah, Chris, you brought up their matchups, by the way. So the Cowboys game is a home game, but that Chiefs game's in Arrowhead. The Chargers game is a Saturday game in LA. Granted, home field advantage in a Chargers game is flip-floppy. But then I believe the Miami game they play, that is a road game too. So there's some really, really tough road games at the end of the year. And while I do like the late bye, I would much rather have a very, very easy schedule to close out. And it could be like, this is the thing. We're early on. We have no idea how these teams look yet. Like our team, their team. For all it could be a complete polar opposite thing. Like we just do not know. So I won't try to be doom and gloom about it yet. The late bye is great. Hopefully we're in a position where we're ready for that tough stretch as it seems now, but it might not even be tough. Who knows?
Yeah. Like we expect the Chiefs to be good. They're probably going to be good. The Cowboys are probably going to be good. The Chargers, the Chargers are one of those teams that you never really know. I mean, you expect them to be good, but they have a way of underperforming expectations. The Patriots have been the bottom feeders of the AFC East. I'll never get sick of saying that. I hope it remains true.
It's tough
to count out Bill, obviously. That defense, that defense is always going to be tough, but I haven't seen them do much, in the way of developing the offense. So I still expect them to be the worst team in the AFC East. And the Dolphins, they're a spunky team that we expect to continue to progress, but the wheels fell off for them last year when Tua got hurt, and that's going to be another big question mark for them this year.
Losing Ramsey when they had Fangio come in was tough. I mean, that's a blow to them that I think I not that they're not going to recover from. I think Miami's going to be very good, but I think it's more the idea that like you just lost this corner that you traded for. Now you have to depend a bit more on Xavier Howard, who seems to be kind of on the back half of his career. It's like, is the secondary going to hold up the way you expected it to? And I think that's a fair question. And also like their defensive line last year and how they ran their defense was super pressure based. And Vic Fangio is not really that much of a blitzer. So it's like, how is it going to work for them? I'm very curious to watch their defense. I still think they're going to be very good. That's not a knock on them. I also feel like we're having a very fun conversation here with with Nikki. Oh, where did this comment go? This is the most annoying thing. Oh yeah. The most annoying thing is I always lose comments, but this was
Oh, you got to
something I
star
actually,
them. You got to star them, and so you save
yeah.
them.
So yeah, I learn these things as I go. It's not like it was a real bad tear. They couldn't even see it on MRI. So I actually brought this up a few weeks back, but I have no medical experience whatsoever. So I didn't want to say it again just because I didn't know if I sounded like a complete moron. But I do wonder, like, is it true? Like the very minor tear might be the reason that his rehab is going so well. Like, is the degree of the tear like obviously if your knee falls off your body, like you know what I mean? But I'm saying like, does a minor tear, does a major tear, like if it's all within the scope of getting the same surgery, how much does that affect recovery? Like I really want to know because you still got to get the procedure done and you probably still have to rehab it the same way. So I'm wondering if that's actually the case.
Yeah, I mean, we need to ask like Kyle Trimble or someone like that to, give us a good read on that. But the way I understand it is they had to operate on both knees, right? Because they had to, I'm pretty sure you have to take part of a ligament from the healthy knee and use it to repair. So I don't know if the degree of tear matters if you have to like beyond a certain point. But I don't feel comfortable to I don't have like an expert opinion on knee surgery. So
Well, I work in sports, man. I am not going to give you any insight onto surgery as much as I'll just say like I hope that's true. Or like I have a buddy in med school. I'll text him after the show's over and see if he knows. But I don't even know if he knows. But that's really all I got today, Chris. I think the only final topic I wanted to bring up was, are there any players that you would say you're concerned about? Maybe as far as what you see from camp so far, or maybe like how the roster's shaking out for their future on this team or as an impact player.
I'm sorry. Pops Mafia. That's a throwback. I don't. You remember those commercials?
I don't think I do. Wait, what is it? This is
So
an old commercial reference?
Whoever's on audio, I'll read it out for you. But Pops Mafia says, "You may not be a doctor, but didn't you stay at a Holiday Inn last night?" It's an old Holiday Inn campaign, which I remember it, but if you don't, I guess it doesn't land.
Oh my God. I'll look up the commercial after this is over. But and also thank you, Linda. We appreciate this comment. We appreciate your view very much. And all of you guys, before we cap off the show today, please remember to hit that like button on your way out if you are logging off, whatever it may be, as well as subscribe to Cover One and like all of the content that's on the YouTube channel. I also have the link to the One Pass in our description below. Please feel free to check that out. But anyways, Chris, any concerns for any players on this roster going into the rest of camp and maybe regular season?
I think the biggest concern is keeping the team healthy, and so far, so good in terms of camp. The biggest question mark to me is that return role. Although relatively speaking, it's not maybe the most important concern. I don't know, man. I feel so good about the team overall. It's tough to find, I guess it the middle linebacker probably is the biggest, is it going to be a glaring weakness when all is said and done? Like whoever wins that job, are they going we won't know this until week 1, week 2, week 3, but is that middle of the field going to just be targeted by other teams constantly, or do we have an answer, whether it's with the middle linebacker or some combination of the linebackers and the safeties and the way that they scheme it? Are they going to be able to defend that in a way that defenses can't consistently exploit it? Because I mean, of course, you're not always going to be able to defend the middle of the field. Like teams are going to find their spots and be able to attack you. But if we can stop teams from consistently exploiting that middle of the field, then we're going to be in a good spot. And I guess that would be my biggest concern is, do we have that answer?
Yeah, that's a good point. Something I was probably going to bring up when I talked about the linebacker matchup too was when we talk about the responsibilities of who your middle linebacker is in this defense going up against some of the very competent offensive minds we have in the division, like McDaniel or Bill O'Brien, Nate Hackett. I don't know. But when you talk about that and you talk about what their role is going to be in pass coverage, are they going to be, what are the growing pains going to look like, right? Because even though I've talked about not wanting to designate a lot of responsibility on them, that doesn't mean none is going to be on them. And if you're talking about maybe a second-year guy who's handling that as the starter and he's kind of struggling, I think teams can exploit the middle of the field very well, and that's going to have to, require some adjusting from McDermott, which the question is, can he? is that something that he has in his arsenal to be able to overcome? Is there something he could show pre-snap that might bait a quarterback into throwing in a part of the field that is much better covered than the middle? Like, that's what I want to see. And I think that's a valid concern, but also, we have a lot of camp left, and to see how these guys develop as coverage linebackers is going to be an interesting thing to watch. I talked about Kaiir Elam before, and I think like slight concern when you talk about him being like a first round pick, maybe not getting as many snaps with the ones. I know he had some, but like, I need to see him getting more reps with the ones. I think that's a big part of his development in this defense. Again, I talked about how McDermott's not going to give you that shot if you're not ready, but I'm hoping that he can prove he's ready, because I just think there's a lot of potential with Elam for this defense, and it's something I want to see. But one thing I'll actually bring up, I don't know if it's really a concern, but maybe more of like me eating crow on an expectation I have. But Dorian Williams is probably going to be Matt Milano's backup this year. At least right now, that's what it's shaping up to be. He's getting weak side snaps. I think they want him to just be kind of that depth option for coverage, which is fine. But I don't know, man. I was kind of hoping that he would get some of those Mike snaps, some of those middle linebacker snaps, and just see like what you got with him. But it could be a similar situation where he's just simply not ready, maybe just very unrefined, and they want to take their time with him. Or maybe they literally just see him as like a versatile depth piece, and that's what he's going to be, which, if that's the case and someone goes down and he could fill in, that's fine. I mean, you're at a point now where you have a very good roster. That might be what you have to do with some of these picks, especially at the end of the third round. But I don't know, maybe I'm just hoping for more from him, maybe more to see like, can he line up there, or is he really just truly going to be weak side depth, which like, it's not the worst thing in the world, but I'd like to see more. So that's really it for me.
So when they brought in Terrell Bernard last year, they had him learn all three linebacker spots. And while I, expect that Dorian Williams, like you said, is going to primarily be, the backup for Matt Milano, I think he will be learning the middle linebacker spot. But, the big thing here is it seems like they want that middle linebacker to be the one who calls the defense and wears that green dot, wears the microphone, so that he's in he hears the plays coming in. And it's probably something where, even though Dorian Williams coming in, you see the speed, you see the wingspan, you think he could, he can clog up passing lanes and maybe be that guy in the middle. They probably feel more comfortable with someone who's been there for at least a year, like Bernard or Spector, or someone who's been there considerably longer, like Dodson. And that was one of the things we touched on, this a little bit earlier when we were talking about Jordan Poyer and his comments about Balin Spector, but we didn't mention that he was extremely positive about Spector's command of the play calling role, and in the huddle and on the field pre-snap. He's shown something that, you got Jordan Poyer, who I don't think he's the type of guy to just kind of blow smoke. If he's saying really positive things like that about a player, I think you can take him at his word.
Yeah.
And he was, he had nothing but good things to say about Spector, not only in his coverage ability, which is something that is, that is a huge development, because we were expecting more of like him as kind of a primarily run defending linebacker, but to hear that he's doing great in coverage, but then beyond that role as the play caller on the field. If Poe thinks that you have what it takes to be in that role, that's something that you need to keep your eye on.
Especially an all-pro safety that's in his 30s, been in the league for a long time. That's a huge vote of confidence. That's why, like, Spector, I didn't have my eyes on him that much. I honestly didn't think he was going to be the one to win it, but now I'm much more keen to the idea. I mean, I'll trust the safety over my limited perspective, but I want to throw this up real quick. I have one more player, but Kyle Allen does not look great. I love this comment so much, but because it's just like, it's our backup quarterback. Like,
how is he at reading greens?
This is great. I'm not trying to throw any shade pops. I just love the comment because I love like the attention. This is my favorite thing about like anyone who follows Cover One is like, these are people who are detail oriented and they're looking at every position group, even the quarterbacks behind Allen. And like, yes, I want the quarterbacks behind Allen to be competent. So if Kyle Allen isn't looking good, that is something that like you keep in the back of your mind. And I'm glad he brought this up. So that's just, I just wasn't expecting someone like, with all the names, I wasn't expecting Kyle Allen to pop up. So that was awesome. But one thing is, I will say Spencer Brown. I've been someone who will tell you, I think he can take that step forward. Again, Greg's talked about this. A bunch of people have brought this up. He never worked with Cromer. He had the injury last year. So there was a very, very slow developmental curve for him. He didn't get a lot of opportunity. But now he's getting to work with the coach and he's getting more of these 1 reps and fully healthy in camp, telling people he feels great, looks good, looks mobile. But again, there's a lot of emphasis on right tackle. They have a lot of faith in Spencer Brown. But Spencer Brown now has to do his end of the job. That's what's very important, because someone in our chat here brought up offensive line and brought up the fact that it's something that we have to look out for, because obviously, and it was right here, Miles. I'm concerned about the O-line. Josh does not need to keep running for his life and playing hero ball. Yes. And I think Josh is very good at evading pressure and evading sacks to begin with, which is why I don't think Spencer Brown needs to take this elite step forward. It'd be great if he did. I'd love it. But I think he just needs to be good, or at least just quality. Be good enough. Because if you can do that, I think Allen can take care of the rest without having to play hero ball. Just being able to stand tall in the pocket, maybe get out of some things and find someone down the field, extend the play a little bit without having to run for his life or force things down the field. It's just a matter of, can Spencer Brown do that? Because if he can't, that's a big blow to the offensive line as a whole. There is an offensive line ranking list where the Bills are in the 20s, but everyone on their line grades in the green except Brown, who had a single digit 8, something really, really brutal. And I think that's going to show you they are really putting their chips in the basket with that. They are trying to put a lot of faith in Spencer Brown, a lot of faith in him as an athlete with his upside, but now he has to return it. He has to actually show he's capable of doing it. And to be honest, I've said it before, I wanted to draft right tackle. I was not a fan of waiting to see if a right tackle who protects Josh Allen's arm can develop, because if he can't, that's a big problem for something that has to be protected. I don't think you get the leeway of patience with that, but the Bills are showing that they are willing to be patient on Spencer Brown, and we just have to see if he can actually hold that end of the bargain with Cromer's coaching in his ear. So that's all I got. Chris, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up today?
No, not really. I saw Pops Mafia asked when do they start wearing pads. I had heard, I think from the Shout guys that they're that Sunday, tomorrow, they're going to start wearing pads. I don't know that for sure. Spencer Brown, like you were just talking about, is a big question mark, but so far so good, it seems, from what we've seen so far in the first 3 days. Again, it's early, but it's just the fact that he's getting a healthy offseason with the team. It's good. It's so huge. I mean, you have to almost look at this for him he's so early on in the development. I feel like I want to trust the Bills and what they see, because they certainly see a lot of potential there. So I think that there's reason to be hopeful that he's going to be that guy on the right side. They also have, with if Torrance gets the starting job, and if we can use a lot of 12 personnel and have Dawson Knox hanging out there to chip guys before he goes out on routes, there's different ways that you can help Spencer Brown if he is kind of coming along slowly.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm less concerned about that than I was before the draft, just because Brandon Thorne appeared on the Cover One Buffalo podcast a couple weeks ago and had a really high opinion of Spencer Brown and what we should expect from him this year. And that's an opinion that I think we shouldn't take lightly. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing, once the pads are on, obviously will be the next big indicator. And then certainly once we get into game action, but we'll keep an eye on it. But I think there's definitely reason for hope.
And Sunday is the first pads day, RJ and Spin brought. So yeah, that's coming soon tomorrow, and we're going to learn a lot more about certain matchups. But one thing I also wanted to say, because I forgot, and I want to bring back up this comment from John, which says, love seeing Torrance get first team reps, but given how the coaching staff likes to ease in rookies, I'm skeptical he actually starts week 1. So the fact that he's getting first team snaps over the past 2 days of camp as soon as camp starts, makes me a bit confident that they are really looking to get him in that role right away and have Bates move around like we alluded to before. Pads will tell us a different story. It's going to be a more physical game. Maybe he gets moved around too much and they demote him to second team. But I think right now the goal is to have Torrance start. That's just my perspective. I'm not saying that with any like actual like info, but you look at how they ease in rookies as they have in the past. But now you're looking at the fact that a guy like Kincaid and a guy like Torrance are getting these first team snaps. It seems like
You're not
that's
going
the
to ease
goal.
in Dalton Kincaid, you know. But
No, and you're not.
it seems like I understand this idea that they ease in rookies, and there is evidence to that effect. With the way that they sort of brought James Cook in last year, but you had Devin Singletary. I think that might have been more about Devin Singletary than about easing James Cook in. Um, Christian Benford started week 1. He's a 6th round player. Like there is also an argument to be made that they don't have a tendency to ease in guys. Like Trey
Yeah.
White started right away. Tremaine Edmonds started right away. Matt Milano didn't, but he started halfway through. I mean, I think that that's a big one that people point to with this
Mhm.
idea of easing rookies in. But Matt Milano was like a day 3 guy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't expected to start over Ramon Humber like right away. So it's I think that idea gets a little bit too much run.
Ramon Humber will always live in my mind as the guy with the coolest face mask ever. And like, I don't know, he was like 55, I think. I don't remember what his number was. He was in the 50s, but there was something about his aesthetic I loved. But yeah, I'm confident that Torrance is going to get runs with the ones. And as long as he looks capable, he'll get that opportunity. And I think the beauty of having a Kincaid and Torrance starting and at least being like capable at their positions to start or even really good is I think that's going to change a lot of the narrative that surrounds Bean's drafting too, because I think there is this kind of like pessimistic approach to how he drafts, which there's some concern, there's some validation in the fact that those middle picks aren't as like big as they are, or maybe some whiffs in the past. But I think if you're getting Kincaid being the stud tight end and you're getting Torrance being the guard we need him to be, that alone, especially because they drafted on the offensive side of the ball, could change a lot of the narrative. And it'd be something I'm excited to see. But Chris, that was a lot of fun. I really appreciate you coming on, talking about training camp with me. A lot of great points on your end. Always a pleasure to get you here. Why don't you tell the people what you got going on, where they could find you, anything coming up in the future? Really want to hear it.
Sure. I'm on Twitter at Chris Kepner. I don't tweet a ton, but I'm out there in people's replies sometimes. And Aaron Quinn and I host the Cover One and Friends podcast on Friday mornings, and we've been sort of on hiatus in the summer, but we'll be coming back with that probably as we get into September. And then we do the Cover One watch party on Cover One's playback channel, which has been a ton of fun. I know, yeah, Joe, you've been on there a few times. We have a lot of fun there with different stuff like Sabres games and the Ocho, stuff like that. We're going to be announcing something that I'm really excited about. I'm not going to tell you what it is yet, but it's happening on September 2nd. That's the Saturday of Labor Day weekend. The Saturday of Labor Day weekend in prime time. We're going to do something really fun to kick off a new series for September. So keep an eye out for that. More to come. But yeah, hope to see you guys over on the playback channel when we're back live there.
I strongly suggest anyone who's in this chat that hasn't checked out any of the playback content, please do. It is a very like the platform itself is super cool because it's very engaging. Like it's very easy to see when people are commenting, bringing people up to the stage. It's really fun. But just the topics that you do, Chris, like the things you brought up when I came on for the Ocho episode, that was an absolute blast. I had so much fun.
That was so fun.
It's a great experience for anyone that can get to watch it. Playback now has an app that you can download, so it's very accessible, very easy. Even if you don't have like a cable provider, if you do solely streaming or just have nothing to input, you could still join the stream. You just can't watch what they're watching, but you could still see everybody, hear everybody, and interact. Yeah. So it's a very accessible platform that I strongly suggest all of you check out.
And I will say one more thing about that is if you create a login when you're, first of all, it's playback.tv/cover1. While we're talking about it, you might as well head over there and create your login because, we love anybody joining for those things. But you have to be logged in to be part of the chat. And that's where we really love the interaction there. And it also, that's what counts, I guess, in terms of the, on YouTube we get ads and lots of people finding it just because there's millions and millions of people on YouTube. Playback is still growing. What counts for us right now is when people are logged in and hanging out, as opposed to just pulling up the link. So yeah, head over to playback.tv/cover1, create an account there. It doesn't cost anything. You don't have to link a TV provider to do that. And like Joe said, it's a lot of fun. We hope to see you on the next one. September 2nd, Saturday in primetime.
9-2, everybody. And yes, Chris, thank you again for joining me. This was a lot of fun. If you want to find me on Twitter, it's @show_DeRosa. I am the dog with the propeller hat because I have like no pictures of myself I like. So that's just what I'm running with for now. Until I get a picture that like I really like, that's what it's going to be. But I'm talking about the Bills all the time and other random things that you probably don't care about. But find me on there. Give me a follow. It'll be a lot of fun to interact with all of you. I always appreciate discussion and I'm happy to talk Bills 24/7. That's a lie, really, whenever I'm awake. But as far as everything else going on, please, again, if you haven't, like this video, like all of the content that's out on Cover One, subscribe to Cover One. If you are not a One Pass member, the link to the One Pass is in the description below. We also have some incredible Cover One merch that I strongly suggest you purchase. Rep the brand out wherever you are. It'd be great for us. It gets some exposure and you get some pretty comfortable, high quality garments to drape over yourself.
And you can see those links right on YouTube now, right down below. That's so cool.
Right down below. Yes, Eric cracked the code. He crunched the numbers. He was in his computer lab coding tirelessly and finally figured out how to get it there. No, but honestly, it's a really cool feature. I'm pretty sure, hopefully it's loading right now, but we do have links to the merch below and YouTube directly. If not, though, the Cover One store does have them as well. But yeah, listen, I appreciate all of you tuning in this week. I know we're finally starting to rev up football season with camp starting and all the preseason games very close. So the fact that everyone's here engaging, like I really, really appreciate you taking time out of your Saturday to sit with Chris and I and just to, watch under review in general. It is really greatly appreciated. And rock with Cover One this season, guys. There's a lot of great content coming out. We got you covered for everything every single week. Nonstop discussion videos on this channel. We're doing a lot of work to make sure that your Buffalo Bills fandom scratch is itched. Did I have that right? It just scratched. I just flipped it around. Dude, that might have been my worst blunder. Again, the coffee's empty and it still has not done that. That's a great outro blunder right there. I'm going to clip that one off. But anyways, everybody, for Chris Kepner and myself, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Under Review. I will be back next week. But in the meantime, enjoy your Saturday, stay safe, and once again, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Previous play will go under review.